Welcome to the World Storytelling Cafe. And tonight, being the other Sunday that isn't the other Sunday, it is the Worldwide Story Round, presided over by the fantastic, the phenomenal, from all the way from Get a Word in Edgeways, if he can, with me rattling on, is Mike Russ.
Hello, hello. Nice to see you all here again. So yesterday we had our town fair. We have a Christmas fair in our little town with Much Wenlock, and 10,000 people turned up, and we sold £500 worth of books, where people came, the authoresses who brought their own books, and they came and we had a stand and they sold all their books as Christmas presents and everything else. And that was about 24 hours ago, and I've just warmed up now because it was absolutely freezing. It's not, Diana, I know you're going to smile because you live in the Highlands of Scotland and I live down here in Shropshire. It wasn't so much that the weather is cold, there is the coldest wind I can remember for a long time. It's a lazy wind. It doesn't go round you, it goes through you. You know, it's one of those winds. And so that's what made everybody cold last night, but we had a really good time. And so here we are again. It's a story round as always. John's here and everything else. So we're going to start with Keith. I'm actually not going to tell a story tonight myself because tomorrow I have to have 2 teeth out. I'm going to go to the dentist. I'm having 2 teeth out this side on my lower jaw. And if anybody wants to be in Church Stretton tomorrow at 2 o'clock, they can go to the dentist instead. I'm quite happy not to go to the dentist, and you can go to the dentist and have 2 of your teeth out instead, but it doesn't work like that. And so I've got a great big like golf ball here. So I'm struggling a bit today. So I'm going to go to Keith first, then Baba, and after Baba, then we're going to go to Simona, and we're going to take it from there. After that will be Diana, and we'll see where we go from there. So I'm going to, if you'll all mute yourselves, please, for those who haven't, and then I'm going to head over to Keith. Keith, over to you.
Well, hello. I was actually in a Santa's Fun Run, a Rotary Santa's Fun Run in Skegness on the promenade. But I wasn't running, I was actually taking the photo. So, so anyway, I've got warmed up because again, there's that cool wind and it was raining sometimes as well. But anyway, it was a good time. We raised quite a lot of money for charity, for the air ambulance and things like that. So, so I was thinking about what I can do along this sort of winter Christmas theme. So this is one of my favorite stories. You probably know this. I call it the 4 Seasons, but sometimes people know it by a different name, but you'll see that as we go along. And so it's in the depths of winter and it was cold. And Marushka, she was living with her stepmother and her stepsister, and she was very beautiful, but they were very cruel. And they made her do all the cooking and the cleaning. She had to clean out the fire in the morning and build up the fires and do all the general tasks in the household. Now, in the middle of one afternoon, her stepmother said to Marushka, Helena would like some violets. Go out and get some violets. And Marushka said, well, how can we get violets? How can I pick violets in the middle of December, in the middle of winter? Go out and get some violets. And if you return without them, you'll get the biggest beat in your life. And so Marushka, she went to the back door and she put on her coat and her scarf and her hat and her gloves, and out of the door, and she walked down the snowy path and then through the woods, and she walked and walked and walked, weeping all the way, wondering how she was going to find some violets in the middle of winter. And her path, she went up a hill. And as she had approached the top of the hill, she saw a fire, a campfire. And sitting round the campfire were 12 men. And the oldest of these 12 men said to her, hello, young lady. Are you all right? Can we do anything for you? And Marushka said, well, my stepmother sent me out to pick violets in the middle of December. How can I pick violets at this time of year? And if I don't return with some violets, then she'll give me a good hiding. She'll beat me. The old man said, I think we can do something about that. And she called over to one of the younger men. She called over to March and said to him, come and take my place. And March came over and took the old man's place. And the snow melted, the sun began to shine, the robins began to sing, and it was spring. And there, before Marushka, was a whole bed of violets. And March said, now you pick some violets, you take them. You're welcome to them. And so she did. She went and she picked a whole bunch of violets and said to March and the rest of the men, well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And she returned down the hill and then through the snow and into the cottage. And when she went into the cottage, she went up to her stepmother and gave her a bunch of violets. And her stepmother was astounded. Where did you find violets at this time of year? And Marushka said, well, I went up the hill and there they were. I was able to find them. And then she went to bed. Next morning, the stepmother shook her out of bed and said, get up. Your stepsister would like some strawberries for breakfast. Strawberries? Marushka said, where can I find strawberries in the middle of winter? You go off and get some strawberries, otherwise you'll get the biggest beat in your life. And so she had no alternative. She went to the back door, she put on her coat, a woolly hat and her scarf and her gloves, and she walked down the snowy path and then up the hill. This time she knew where she was going, and she went up and found the 12 men sitting round the fire. And the old man said, hello, young lady, what is the matter? He said, my stepmother's sent me out to find strawberries in the middle of winter. Where can I find some strawberries? And the old man said, he said to one of the 12 men sitting around, June, come across and take my place. And it was summertime. And the birds were singing, the grass was growing, and there was a whole patch of strawberries in front of Marushka. And June said, well, you take some strawberries and you take them back. And so she did. She opened up her apron and she filled up her apron with a whole lot of strawberries. And she said, thank you so much. And then she returned down the hill and into the cottage. And she went to her stepsister and her stepmother, and she opened her coat and opened her apron, and there was a whole lot of strawberries, lovely strawberries. And Helena, her stepsister, she grabbed the strawberries, she ate them, and the juice was still dripping down her chin. She said, go and fetch me some apples. And Helena, and Marushka said, well, Helena, where can I get apples in the middle of winter? Well, you go to where you got the strawberries and the violets. In fact, I will go and get them. And so she rushed out of the cottage, hardly bothered with a coat, even though it was snowing and it was blowing and it was cool. And she went up the hill and she found the 12 men. And the old man said to her, hello, what can I do for you? Out of my way, said Helena, out of my way. My sister came up here and she climbed violets and she found strawberries and I want some apples. Well, the old man, who was named December, thought this very rude girl deserved a lesson. And so he raised his hands and the snow began to fall and the wind began to blow and it was snowing and blowing with big drifts. And Elena, she wandered off into the snow and was frozen to death and never seen again. Now, back at the cottage, Elena's mother, Marushka's stepmother, was wondering where her daughter had got to. And so she put on a hat and coat and she went off out into the wind and the snow. And she wandered around and was never seen again. And so Marushka was able to build up the fire and sit beside the fire, all toasty and warm. And she had a very happy Christmas.
Well done, Keith. Thank you very much. It's lovely to hear that story. Loved it.
Yeah, sometimes
Right,
it's
now
called,
I'm going to speak.
sometimes it's called strawberries in winter, I think, but I call it the four
Sometimes.
seasons. Yeah.
Sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. I wouldn't worry about it sometimes. I'd like to say hello to David from sunny Lanzarote. Envy and jealousness comes to mind.
I just thought I'd pop in and make you feel all very, very jealous.
Yeah, I know. Well, it is succeeded, but just remember, John and I, we have a pact here that revenge is served on a cold plate, and we will find a way of getting you back
Very
at
good.
some point. But never mind. Enjoy your glass of red wine in sunny Lanzarote, and you will
It could be
notice
Ribena.
that,
It could be Ribena, Mike. What makes you think it's red wine?
Because you're
yeah,
smiling.
right. It's Ribena. But you will know. Is that behind you? Is that sun? Is it still sunny there? Is it?
No,
is
no,
the sun
no.
gone down yet?
I'm in the courtyard, and that's the kitchen where a delicious
Oh,
fish is being grilled. So I won't stop long.
right. Does it come with butter and fish and chips?
No, no.
Oh, now y'all are making me hungry.
Oh, you don't know how to live, mate. Okay, so we're going to go over to Baba. But if
All
you
right,
have
but
to,
Mike-
you're here for the hour or so, David. Or do you want to go on? You're going to do one, David.
Well, I have to leave shortly, so I'll just pop in.
Right. Okay. Baba.
In other
we'll go
words,
to you. Okay.
He's going to have another adult beverage.
It's up to you whether I tell a story or not.
Mike, if he wants to tell one now, I'll wait.
Well,
But I have to say one thing. Mike, you were talking about revenge. Revenge is a dish served best with a great alibi.
I'll tell you a quick story that I learned from Irshad Barkat from Pakistan very recently, from Lahore, because he was one of the people sharing stories with me recently in my project. And I just love the story. I've heard it before, but it's the first time. I've never told this story before, not to a kind of public audience. So let me try it. So it's a Johar story or a Nasruddin story, okay? And you probably know it already, but it's one of my favorites. So Johar was visiting a strange city, a city he had never been to before. And on arrival, his clothes had got grubby, his turban was filthy, his beard was greasy, and Johar decided to go to the hammam, the Turkish baths. And he entered, and well, it looked like a fine baths. And the owner of the hammam looked at Johar with his grubby outlook and said, so what do you want? Well, a massage, a bath, my clothes to be washed. Very well, said the owner. And he took Johar to the grubbiest little room in the corner. It hadn't even been cleaned since the last client had been in there, and his clothes were taken from him, but it was cold in there, and the water that was brought for him to bathe in was tepid. And well, there was no pleasant oils to massage him or perfumes, nothing. He wasn't even brought a beverage. And at the end of his time there, when his clothes were returned, they were still damp. And as he left the hammam, the owner proffered the tray to take the payment. And Johar reached into his purse and dropped 3 fine gold coins onto the tray. Well, the owner of the hammam was amazed. 3 gold coins? And he bowed in gratitude. And Johar went on. And he stayed for a couple more days in that strange city. And by the time it was time to leave, he needed another bath. So he returned to that same hammam. And this time he was welcomed with open arms. Oh, greetings to you, greetings to you. The owner recognized him as a high-paying customer. And he was brought inside and he was shown to the most sumptuous room with a soft sofa, and he was undressed with great celebration, and his clothes were taken away to be washed, and he was bathed personally, and he was given a massage with delicious scented oils, and he was given mint tea to drink, and it was a wonderful service. And at the end, his clothes were returned to him, and they were hot and they were warm and they were soft, and he dressed himself. And as he left the hammam, the owner proudly proffered the tray. And you know what Johar did? He took out 3 coins, but these coins were copper coins, and he dropped them into the tray one by one. "What's this?" said the owner. "Copper. But the other day when the service wasn't as good, you gave us gold. What's the meaning of this?" And Johar nodded. "Of course. Last time I gave you gold, and this time I give you copper." "Why? Why?" "Well, last time I was paying for the service I got today.
Yeah.
And today I'm paying you for the service that I received 3 days ago." And he walked out. You've heard that
Right.
one before, haven't you?
Well,
You've heard that one before?
we've heard lots of things over the years. I don't actually
Yeah.
think I have. Actually, to be
I
fair.
haven't.
No,
It's, a
but
lovely,
I'm going to ask.
it's one of my favorite Johar Nasruddin stories. That one.
Right.
Irshad
definitely-
Barkat told it to me recently.
I would
Yeah,
definitely like
right.
to incorporate that into my repertoire. I love the way you told it.
Right. I'm going to
Well,
reply,
check out
David.
Irshad telling it. Check out Irshad telling it as part of the Around the World in 88 Tales, Babasi.
All right. All right.
It's
Okay.
the object is a water jar, an ancient Greek hydria, a water jar.
Oh, real quick. The other night I was flipping through YouTube,
Yeah.
trying to relax before going to sleep. And so I flicked on YouTube, and guess what popped up first on my screen? You and I talking and Around the World in 88 Tales.
Hey, cool.
So I watched it. And then I was so excited I couldn't sleep. But I
Well,
just
that's
wanted to share that with
That's
you.
a,
That's because you
John-
were so good at it, Babasi.
John, that's about the most egotistical thing I've heard for a long time, that you sit on YouTube and you watch yourself. David, I'm going to answer.
I sometimes
That's all I ever do.
I
Mike.
sometimes do it just to convince myself that I exist.
Je comprends.
David, for giving me a story I don't think I've heard, I'm going to ask you to answer a riddle.
Go on.
Right, I'll tell everybody the riddle, and then we'll get Barbara to tell a story, and we'll see if you can answer the riddle. So the riddle is this: what has a forest with no trees? What has a river with no water? What has a farm with no animals or crops? And what is a town with no people or lights?
Is there one answer for all of those?
Right, I'll say it again. What am
There's
I
four
talking?
different. Are they 4 different answers, Mike?
No, there's one answer. All right, I'll say it again, then we'll get Baba to tell us his story for tonight. So, a forest with no trees, a river with no water, a farm with no animals and crops, and towns with no people or lights. Of what do I speak of? Baba, we go to you, and can you mute yourself, please, David? Can you mute yourself, please, David?
David, now I know you wish your beard was longer so you could ponder. All right. So the stories, the two short stories I'm going to share with you are stories that I can envision elders sitting amongst the youngins in the village and those in between and sparking their imagination and their responses by the following stories. You see, the first story is about a girl, a young lady actually, and it was around the time that she was to be married, but she wasn't. So one day she went down by the river. Well, actually, she went to the river and she was doing her laundry. This is before Maytag and before we had washing machines, when these were your washing machines. And so she's washing her clothes in the river. And across the bank on the other side, there was a hunter, a musician, and a swimmer. And they were gathered around a campfire and they were watching the young lady wash her clothes. And they just watched her. And she's just washing. But a crocodile in the river took notice of her and began to swim very, very slowly and very carefully toward her. And she's washing. And the musician and the hunter and swimmers are just watching her. And the crocodile comes up, opens her mouth, and begins to swallow her whole. Well, the musician saw what was going on. He picked up his instrument and he began to play. And the music was so soothing that the crocodile was kind of lulled and forgot that it was supposed to be eating, and it just kind of swayed back and forth with the young lady still firmly clamped between its jaws. The hunter took out his bow and arrow and he aimed with unerring aim and shot the crocodile, rendering it instantly to be ready for a suitcase, some shoes, and a good crocodile barbecue. Now, the crocodile, although dead, still had the young lady in his mouth and began to sink into the river, and the swimmer jumped into the river and he began to swim. And he swam and he snatched the young lady from the jaws of the crocodile just before he went under the water and returned her to the banks. And then he swam back with his comrades, and they each began to discuss who had won the right to marry this young lady. The musician said, well, I have won the right, for my music lulled the crocodile into forgetting that he was supposed to be eating her. The hunter said, no, but I killed the crocodile, making it impossible for it to eat her. But the swimmer said, yes, you did. But then the crocodile began to sink in the river, and I swam and rescued her from the jaws of the dying crocodile and put her back on the bank. I deserve to marry her. And they argued amongst themselves. Some say they're still arguing. So the question I put to you is, which of them do you think deserved to marry the young lady? The hunter, because of his unerring aim, the musician, because of his melodious music, or the swimmer, because he literally saved her from the clutches of death? Which do you think and why? And if you want to respond very quickly, you may, for I will not answer this question. Go ahead. Unmute.
The woman should choose.
You are a wise
The
man.
woman
you.
gets to choose. That's as simple as that, Papa. There's no
Thank you,
argument.
Mike and
The woman
Simona, for
gets to
speaking
choose.
everybody's mind.
What about the crocodile?
Now, remember, this is back in the day.
21st century. We can't do it like we used to do when I was a kid. It's not allowed anymore. Okay. Next
Well, you see,
question. If you're going to
that
give
would
us
be-
wriggles, if you're going to give us wriggles like that, they're going to be better nowadays. No.
This is a question that would be proffered by the elders to stimulate thought and conversation among those who were younger. Now, we also have to take into account the time that this story took place, in which she would have little to no choice about who her mate may be. But I have a story about that, but I'm not telling it today. So, but I like your answer. You're a very wise man, or a good actor. My second story. My second story. As we grow older, they say that wise people tend not to suffer the company of fools easily. So this story is about what some people may consider fools. You see, one day there was a boy sitting by the roadside, bawling his eyes out. He's just crying. And along came 4 men, and they said, "Why are you crying?" "My father's parakeet just flew away. And he's his favorite pet, and I have no way of getting him. Actually, some men took him and I don't know what to do, but if I give him back, if I can get him back, I will reward the person responsible with anything they ask for." Well, one man was a wizard. He said, let's see. The other man was a thief. There was also a hunter and a carpenter. So the wizard turned to the thief and said, "We must prove worthy of this journey, for I have magic and I have a magical glass boat that I will take, and those who pass the test may come with me to retrieve the parrot and share in the riches." So he turned to the thief and he says, "Over yonder." Now, back in the day of my parents, yonder was longer than you wanted to walk. "Over yonder, there's a hen. And if you can take an egg from that hen without the hen noticing, you may join me on this quest." And so the thief stole himself away. See what I did there? And he got up upon the hen and he plucked the egg without the hen noticing. And he came back. And the wizard said, "Ah, you have earned your place on my glass boat." And then the hunter took the egg, tied a noose around it, and hung the egg from the limb of a tree. And he stepped back a pace or two, and he took his bow and arrow, and he shot the egg, shattering it. And the wizard said, "Ah, your aim could serve us well. You may join us on the boat." But the egg laid on the ground, shattered into 1,000 pieces. But the carpenter gathered up all the parts of the egg, and he sewed and he repaired the egg until it was in pristine shape, leaving not so much as a drop of its inwards of its contents, because if he had not done so, the yoke would have been on him. So the wizard said, "Ah, indeed, carpenter, you may join us as well." So the thief, the hunter, and the carpenter joined the wizard in his glass boat, and they began to sail. And using his magical powers, the wizard said, "There's the ship that the parrot is on. We shall catch up with it soon, but we must devise a plan for getting back the parakeet so we can share in the rewards." And as they got close to the ship, the wizard laid upon a spell that made all that were upon the ship fall deep into a sleep. And the thief said, "I will go and I will steal the parakeet back." And so the thief boarded the ship, found the parakeet, and he looked at a table laden with food, or some people say laden with food. And he said, "But I think I'll have a bite to eat first." And so he helped himself to a very good meal. And then he took the parakeet and he joined the wizard. Now, the wizard's spell was very, very brief. No sooner had the thief returned to the glass boat with the parakeet, everyone, including the captain of the ship, awakened. And the first thing the captain noticed is what the parakeet was gone. And so the captain of the ship happened to be somewhat magical himself, and he caused a great storm to occur. And the storm was blowing heavy winds, and the winds came down, and the rains hit the glass ship so hard that it shattered. But the carpenter very quickly mended the ship back together. And while he was mending the ship back together, the hunter shot arrow after arrow after arrow, shattering all the rain until it was merely a mist in the sky. But the captain of the boat was not to be outdone. He was angry, and he called down lightning, and lightning came down, flash, flash, flash. The lightning came down heavy, and the lightning once again shattered the glass boat into millions of pieces. But the carpenter began to mend the ship back together, and the hunter took his arrows and shot at each and every lightning bolt, shattering it before it could reach the ship. And just before the last lightning bolt could come down, the wizard guided the lightning bolt to the boat with the captain full of thieves, and it sank. When they returned, the boy was still sitting by the roadside, but he was all cried out. And the wizard said, "We have found your parakeet. We have found your father's parakeet." And the boy said, "I'm so glad. Thank you. Thank you. I will reward you. Let's go back, for my father's very rich and very powerful, and he will give you anything you want, whatever your desires are. We have gold and jewels. We even have a hen that lays precious jewels, anything you want." And so the four thieves put their heads together and decided they wanted the goose that laid jewels. And so that's what they're given, because the goose could lay jewel after jewel after jewel after jewel. So when they were gone from the boy's father's compound, they began to argue. And the wizard said, "You know, actually, this is my goose. I'm the one that cast the spells. I'm the one that chose you. So I deserve the goose." And the thief said, no, there's no way. I'm the one that stole aboard the ship. I'm the one that stole the goose, that stole the parakeet and brought it back to the boy. I deserve the goose that lays the jewel. And the hunter said, "Yeah, but I'm the one that shot the rain and shot the shot the lightning bolt so it couldn't damage the boat, your glass boat. I deserve the goose that lays the jewels." The carpenter said, "Have you all lost your mind? I'm the one that repaired the boat, not once, but twice. I deserve the goose that lays the jewels." And they kept arguing. And then they decided, you know what? We'll divide this goose into 4 parts. And they cut the goose in 4 equal parts, and each took his share. And upon doing so, realized that they had just cheated themselves out of the most precious thing that they could have had. Now, I don't suffer fools well, but I'm going to ask you this question anyhow, even though Mike already has an answer. Who do you think deserved the goose that laid precious jewels?
The woman.
There was no woman in the story.
But
had
the
you-
woman from the first story.
I think it should be the giant.
Okay, again, there's no giant in the story. That's why he deserves it, you know. But that again is a story that will be told to stimulate the minds and encourage conversation among the young and those who are not quite elders yet. For in the end, it really matters not which one you think deserves the goose that laid the jewels. What matters is that you understood their foolishness and that you understood the merits of the story. Asante.
Absolutely. Well done, well done, well done.
Thank you.
So I know
love you,
David
I love
has.
you all and leave you. Bye.
Have you got the answer,
Bye.
David? Have you got the answer?
I'm completely stumped, Mike. I'm stumped
Right.
with all of these riddles.
Right, here we go. This is the answer. I'll say it again.
Oh yeah, here
What
we
has
go.
a forest with no trees? What has a river with no water? What has a farm with no animals or crops? And what has a town with no people or lights? It's a map.
See, I would have said dictionary, but all right. Hey, David, your fish is ready. That means you're finished for the day. And I scaled back my puns just for you.
Okay. Thank you very much, David. So have a nice meal, my friend, and we'll see you next time we're here. Right, so we're going to Simone now. And then Dispinia, are you telling a story later?
If there's time, I do have a
Absolutely, there
story.
is time. Yes,
And
I do.
it seems that I am somehow universally coordinated with Baba Say today. So
Right, so which country do you reside in?
in Greece,
You're Greece, yes, I thought you were. Yes, okay. Right, so will you go after Simonia, please? Okay, Fine. Simonia, there we go.
Hello, and I'm actually going to tell the story I told at the Around the World in 88 Tales project with David. So it's the second time the project has been mentioned this evening. And I told this story at the project and then I had to retell it last week because we had a party for the end of the project. And I just remembered how such a wonderful story it is, so I thought I would share it with you. Long, long ago, an old woman was walking home after a long day of work. And she was tired, but she looked as cheerful as ever, as if there were no worries at all in the world. And she was walking on a path when suddenly she saw something in front of her. "What's this?" she asked, and she looked closer and, oh my, what have I seen? I can't believe how lucky I've been, she exclaimed, because in front of her she saw a big black pot with a lid. "This pot is just perfect, even if it might be cracked. This is absolutely perfect for my flowers at home. Never abandoned this, I just can't understand." And so she took the lid, she looked inside and, oh my, what have I seen? I can't believe how lucky I've been, she exclaimed, because inside the pot was full of gold coins. "My working days are done," she exclaimed. "With all these gold coins, I can live a wealthy and comfortable life and still have plenty more to give to my family and friends. I'm so lucky." And so she took her shawl from her shoulders, she tied it around the pot, and she started to drag the pot back home. And she dragged it and she dragged it and she dragged it, and she thought of all the amazing things that she would do with all those gold coins. And she dragged it and she dragged it and she dragged it, and it was heavy. Just 5 minutes. I can relax for 5 minutes. This pot is so heavy. And so she sat on the grass and she decided to have another look inside the pot. And so she grabbed the lid, she looked inside and, oh my, what have I seen? I can't believe how lucky I've been, she exclaimed, because this time inside the pot, the gold coins had transformed into a lump of silver. Silver is way better than gold. With this lump of silver, I can make a lot of silver coins and still live a comfortable life with plenty more to give to my family and friends. Oh, I'm so lucky. This way, I won't be so afraid that somebody would come into my house to steal the money. And so she took her shawl and she started to drag the pot back home again. And she dragged it and she dragged it and she dragged it, and she thought of all the great things that she would do with all those silver coins. And she dragged it and she dragged it and she dragged it, and it was heavy. 5 more minutes. It's such a wonderful day. There's no rush to go back home. And so she sat on the grass and she decided to have another look inside the pot. And so she grabbed the lid, she looked inside and, oh my, what have I seen? I can't believe how lucky I've been, she exclaimed, because this time inside the pot, the lump of silver had transformed into a lump of iron. Iron is way better than gold or silver. With this lump of iron, I can make a lot of iron coins and still live a nice life. There won't be much more to give to my family and friends, but they're doing fine, they're all right. And I can store the iron coins in my fireplace. I am so lucky. And so she took her shawl and she started to drag the pot back home again. And she dragged it and she dragged it and she dragged it. And she thought of all the nice things that she would do with all those iron coins. And she dragged it and she dragged it and she dragged it. And it was heavy. Last 5 minutes, I'm almost at home. And so she sat on the grass and she looks behind her at the pot, but oh my, what have I seen? I can't believe how lucky I've been, she exclaimed, because this time the pot itself had transformed into a big black stone. I am so lucky. This stone is perfect to keep my front door open. I've never told anybody that I needed a stone like this. This is just perfect. I love it. It's not gold, silver, or iron, but I can still work. It's fine. But this stone is just perfect. And so she took her shawl and she started to drag the stone back home again. And she dragged it and she dragged it and she dragged it. And she thought of how lovely that stone would look in front of her door. And she dragged it and she dragged it and she dragged it. And she was almost at home when suddenly the stone didn't feel heavy anymore. And so she looked back and, oh my, what have I seen? I can't believe how lucky I've been, she exclaimed. Because in front of her, the stone was transforming into the Headley Cow, a shape-shifting trickster that was known throughout the land, that grinning and laughing ran away from her, leaving her with nothing. And so the old lady went into her house. She sat in front of her fireplace and she thought of how lucky she had been to have seen the Headley Cow with her own eyes. And this is the end of the story, and I just love it because it teaches us about positivity and always seeing the bright side of things.
That's a lovely story, Simonia. And I say to you every time, to tell a story in your second or third language is always a lovely thing to do. And your command of our language or my language is absolutely fine. You speak the language fluently, my dear, you really do.
Thank you.
Right, and we're going to go to Dispinia next, and then we're going to go to Diana after, if that's okay with you, Diana. Okay, yeah, so Dispinia will go to you. So we're going from Italy to Greece. Okay.
I have a story and a poem, if that's okay. They are
Absolutely,
very
poems. We love
tightly
poems here.
connected.
Absolutely, we do.
Okay, perfect. So, once upon a time, 3 friends lived in a land, but the land was suffering from crisis. So food was scarce, there were no jobs, there was no money to be made. And the 3 friends decided to leave and look for a better future. So they set off early in the morning. They started walking and walking until they reached a clearing in a forest. And there they decided to camp for the night. So one of them was a carpenter, the other was a tailor, and the last one was a priest. And they were all highly skilled in their fields. Now, in this clearing where they camped, they set up a nice bonfire and sat around it, but they decided not to sleep at all at the same time, because as the land was so poor, maybe bandits would take advantage of them while they slept. So they decided to guard, each one in turn. They drew the sticks, and the shortest one was the carpenter's. So he was to guard his friends while they slept first. So the 2 of them started sleeping tightly, and after a while he felt his eyelids drop and he was ready to fall asleep too, but he thought that he should find a way to occupy himself so that he wouldn't, so that they would all stay safe. Now, in a short distance, he saw a tree trunk that had been cut and abandoned. And he thought that maybe he should try using his skills to get busy, and that would keep him awake for sure. So he took his gear, he took his equipment with him, and he went to the trunk and started sculpting and carving. And he made the wooden statue of a lady, a very pretty one at that. And he just let her sit there and didn't say anything to his friend when he woke him up, because he wanted to have fun, yet to laugh at him. So he told nothing, just woke up the tailor and went to sleep. So now it was the tailor's turn to keep guard while his friends were asleep. And up in the distance, when he started feeling sleepy, he saw a figure of something that he didn't know what that was. He thought that it might be a thief or something. So he took a little stone and threw it and had a tack. Straight sound. He said, that's not a living being. So he went nearer and he realized that his friend, the carpenter, had obviously made a wooden woman. So he thought that maybe he should do something with the statue so that he could too be busy and not fall asleep. So he took his gear, he took his needles, he took his thread and the finest cloth he had with him, and went over to the wooden statue and started making the loveliest garment for the woman. It was a gown like there was no other. So he dressed her all up and she looked magnificent indeed, and then decided not to tell the priest anything so that he would have a laugh at his expense. So he woke the priest up and lay fast asleep. Now, while the priest was guarding his friends, he saw the figure of a woman up in the distance and thought that he should go and check it out just to make sure that it was no trap or anything. So indeed, he went there and he realized that it had been his friends, of course, the carpenter and the tailor. Who else would have been? They had created this wooden creature, only it looked so beautiful. He couldn't believe what a nice job they had done. Now, this priest was no ordinary priest, like he had real faith in him. So he started praying to his God. He prayed and prayed. In fact, he prayed all the rest of the night long for God to give this being, this wooden statue, to give it life. And when the sun started shining from the horizon and the first beams came up, suddenly he heard the noise like a person gasping for breath. And it was the woman who had come to live. It was alive. She was alive. So he took her by the hand and we went back to the place where his friends were sleeping, woke them up and told them about the miracle that had taken place. They rubbed their eyes in surprise. They looked at the woman and she was so beautiful. Now, so beautiful, in fact, that they all wanted her to be their wife. So, as Babasi told us earlier, the carpenter said, well, of course it was me. I made her. It was just a trunk of wood. It was nothing before I laid my hands on it. Look at her now. And the tailor said, are you joking? If I hadn't dressed her up, you wouldn't even look at her. Look at the garment, look at the gown she's wearing. That is my work. It came out of my hands. And the priest said, are you guys crazy? If it wasn't for me, this would have been a wooden statue. It would have no life in it. Of course it's me. I am entitled to take her as my wife. And they started arguing, of course, and there was a lot of shouting. So their yelling caught the attention of the landowner who was passing by. And he went to see what all the fuss was. And as soon as they told him what it was about, he said, well, if that's the case, this land is mine. I think the woman rightfully belongs to me. So they all started arguing again, and there was no end to the argument. So they decided to go to the judge and let him make a just decision. But the woman was so beautiful that even the judge himself wanted her to be his wife. So this whole affair took so much, it became so loud. It drew so much attention that it reached the ears of the king. Now, they presented themselves with the woman in front of the king and asked him who he thought should be the rightful husband of this wonderful woman. And the king stroked his beard and said, this woman is so beautiful. She deserves to be my wife. I will make her my queen. And then there was a silence in the room. And suddenly, the girl spoke and said, excuse me, kind gentleman, do I have a say in this? Now they were all taken aback because they had never heard her speak before. And so, of course, they considered, and each one of them thinking that they would be the chosen one. And the girl said, I humbly thank you for bringing me to life. I wouldn't exist without you. But this great, wonderful word you have brought me is totally unknown to me. So please allow me to leave you to your affairs and go out and find out what this world is about and be my own woman. And she was gone, and none of them ever saw her again. So that answers Babas's question and satisfies my audience from what I say. Thank you. And before we comment on it, please let me read my favorite at this point poem to you because it is so closely related. It is up on the internet. No author appears, just some inspired poet made it. Okay. She sat at the back, and they said she was shy. She led from the front, and they hated her pride. They asked her advice, and then questioned her guidance. They branded her loud, then were shocked by her silence. When she shared no ambition, they said it was sad. So she told them her dreams, and they said she was mad. They told her they'd listen, then covered their ears and gave her a hug while they laughed at her fears. And she listened to all of it, thinking she should be the girl they told her to be best as she could. But one day, she asked what was best for herself, instead of trying to please everyone else. So she walked to the forest and stood with the trees. She heard the wind whisper and dance with the leaves. She spoke to the willow, the elm, and the pine, and she told them what she'd been told time after time. She told them she felt she was never enough. She was either too little or far, far too much, too loud or too quiet, too fierce or too weak, too wise or too foolish, too bold or too meek. Then she found a small clearing surrounded by firs, and she stopped, and she heard what the trees said to her. And she sat there for hours, not wanting to leave, for the forest said nothing. It just let her breathe.
Very, very well done. Very, very well done, Disciplinia. And I want you to come every. I do this once a fortnight. I want you to come every time. I think that was wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, so we're going to go to Diana now up in the Highlands of Scotland. I can almost feel the blizzards and the cold outside. But they say if you live in the Highlands, Stanley Robinson used to say that all the women are beautiful. They have a glow that comes from the beauty from inside, and it gives them a physical beauty. He used to say that all the time. So I leave you to a beautiful woman from the Highlands.
Well, I'm not going to argue with that, am I? So yes, I have a story that's actually set near Orkney in Shetland, and near one of the islands, Sandy. It starts off at the cold time of year, at this time of year, but it's really about a different time of year, as you'll find out. So there was a man called Magnus. He was a fisherman, or at least he used to be. He didn't go out so much now. And on this particular day, he was sitting by the fireside, looking over contentedly at his wife. And he was remembering all those times when he's been out in his boat and how a storm had risen, or it had been lovely and so peaceful, and how many fish he'd caught and how many he'd managed to sell to market, and when times had been good and when times had been not so good. Well, when he started remembering back, he was a different person then. His name was Magnus, and he was really quite shy in the beginning when he was in his 20s or 30s. And he did want to share his life with a partner, hopefully at some point, but he never really had much courage to talk to women or to get to know them. He very much kept himself to himself. He was a gentleman, to be sure, but he would go out in his boat and he loved the fishing. His grandfather had been a fisherman, his father, and now he was. And he went out and he absolutely loved it. He loved the calm, he loved the unexpected nature of the sea, because no one could tell what was going to happen. Like on this particular day, it had been so beautiful. It was midsummer and all these figures were dancing on the sand. And he was out at sea looking back over, and he was quite entranced. And he'd heard about these people from his grandparents. They had said that in midsummer, these people come and they dance, but only for a short time before they go back into the sea and under the waves and away to another world. And it was so beautiful. And the way the light was shining, it just cast a beautiful shade all over them. And he was quite entranced. He practically forgot that he'd gone out to go fishing. But then, very suddenly, the sky darkened. It was grey, it was black, and the thunder came, and the rain came down, and the wind, the terrible wind that goes right through you. Oh, it was awful that night. And it took him all his time to steady his boat, but he managed to get it over into a little bay and to shelter there till the worst of the storm was over. But when he looked again at the beach, there were no people there. There were no dancers. They'd all disappeared, and he couldn't quite work out where they'd all gone or what had happened. But he knew the stories, of course, because the stories had lasted forever, all about the Selkies, how they could be human, how they could be seals, as if they were two entities at the same time. Well, he stayed until the storm subsided, and he went back to the sandy beach, and he parked his boat and he walked up, and his cottage was just up looking out over the bay. It was a beautiful view that he had, and he went in and he sat down, and he was really tired, but he quickly had something to eat and he went to bed. But that night he didn't sleep so well. There was an eerie kind of a sound. And he couldn't work out where it was coming from. And at first he thought it was a seabird, and maybe the seabird had got trapped or, you know, had come into difficulties. But when he listened again, the more he listened, the longer he listened, he realized it wasn't a seabird. Well, he wasn't sure about that, but he was so dog-tired that he still went to his bed, and off he went to sleep. But in the middle of the night, around about 3 o'clock, he was awoken by a similar sound. And this time he had to follow his instinct. And he had to find out where the sound came from and what it represented and who it was or what it was and why it was. So he got into his boat and he tried very hard to follow the sound. And he did. And eventually he came into a little inlet with sand. And who was sitting there but this woman? And she had her back to him and she had long, dark hair. And he was quite taken aback. He didn't really think it could be a person. Well, he wasn't sure. I mean, it sounded like a seabird, but he was surprised to see her nonetheless. And he went over. But he took his time and was very quiet and very gentle. And he walked round so that she could see him, so she wouldn't be too surprised, so she wouldn't be too afraid. And well, the poor woman was shivering. He got a blanket out of his boat. He gave her it and wrapped it round her. And yes, she was starting to feel a little bit better, but no words came out. And all the time he's thinking, is this a selkie? Did she not manage to find her skin in time to go back into the water? Who is this? But he could see that her need was great, that she must be hungry, and she was very tired, and she looked very surprised about finding herself there in the first place, and worried. So he motioned to her to come to the boat, and there must have been something about the kindness in his eyes, that she trusted him and got into the boat with her blanket, and he took her back round to the sandy beach where he parked the boat, and they walked together up to his cottage. And when they got in, she lay down on the settee, and before he could say anything to her, she'd fallen asleep. So he happed her around with the blanket. He even went and got another one. And then, well, it was early in the morning, and what was he going to do? But he got his own breakfast, and he started thinking, and well, he wasn't sure, but he was determined that he was going to try and find out what was this all about. Who the people had been on the beach. Had she been one of them? Was she a dancer? Of course, it was midsummer, and that rang bells with selkies and magic and things that he'd been told about when he was just so high. Well, he thought to himself, if this is a selkie, then she must have a skin. Perhaps she couldn't find it. Perhaps that's why she was on the beach where she was without any clothing. Perhaps she couldn't find her skin to get back into the water to go with her family. So he went out in the boat while she slept in the cottage. And he went out and he was looking all around to see if he could find anything that resembled a selkie skin, a seal skin. And there were many skerries round about, but no, sometimes it looked like there was something there, a darker patch on the top of it, but it wasn't when he got close. So he travelled on. But then just before he was thinking of coming back, he saw something over a huge jagged rock coming out of the sea. And when he got closer and closer He could tell, and he could touch it, and he could feel this was a sealskin. It must belong to the lady back with him. Well, he took it in his boat, and he went back, and he loved the feel of this skin. It told of another world, another life. And when he got back home, he looked at this woman lying asleep, and he thought to himself, oh, doesn't she look peaceful? And he somehow felt that this probably was her skin. In fact, there was something deep down inside of him that told him this skin did belong to her. And what he should do was have it there ready for when she woke up so that she could go back to the sea, which would have been her right. It was her skin. It was just something that he felt, that he knew deep down. But he didn't do that, because when he looked at her, he saw this woman that was appealing, and she was needy, and he could help her. And then he realized, when he thought about it more, that perhaps she could help him. Perhaps together they could have a life together. They could share good things. It wouldn't just be the same coming home to your lonely cottage every night. This would be company, all the things they could do, the summer walks, the fishing boat trips. And he got totally carried away in his imagination, and he took this skin and he put it in a chest and he locked it, and he put the key up on a shelf, and he waited. And then she woke. And of course, it was all so strange. She'd been so tired when she came in. She didn't really have her bearings, but she rubbed her eyes. And he found some clothes for her, because every so often, Magnus's sister would come and stay. And she would leave clothes there for the next time, because every so often she would do that, and it saved her always taking things with her. So the clothing was a bit big and bulky, but well, he would go fishing, and he would, in time, he hoped, make enough money that he could get her some nice clothes. But he didn't know her yet, of course, and how was he going to get to know her? He couldn't speak the tongue of the Selkie, but he did know that Selkies love music. Selkies love the fiddle or the harp, or whatever, the flute. So he got down his grandfather's fiddle and he started to play on that. And he could see that she was relaxing a bit, and the food that he'd made for her, which she initially had pushed away, she was now pulling towards her. And after that, it was a long, slow process, but they gradually got to know each other and they fell in love. But of course, in the back of his mind, Magnus knew about the Selkie skin, and it did trouble him, but he told himself that this was for the best because they were happy. Well, they were happy, but she didn't know that he had the skin, her passport to her life before him. She wasn't able to make that choice for herself, whether to stay or not to stay. She had to make the best of it. But they did have a bond. They did have a bond, but Magnus did have guilt as well. And then there was a magical day. They were down at the beach and they were dancing together because he had the fiddle. And it was so lovely. And this was a really happy time that they shared. And he got down on one bended knee and he held out his hand. And she gave him hers. And yes, they would be married. Well, there was a small affair at the local church, and the local neighbours came by, and they did have a lovely time. And they were very happy. And a year later, she had a young child, and they were both pleased. This was a nice, strong lad. Rudy, they called him. Rudy, and he would grow up to learn about them both, and he would be strong. And he had his parents there together to bring him up. He would go with his father fishing. Well, the thing was, To begin with, when the baby came, his wife was very attentive and she looked after the baby very well until it got to about 1 year old. And then it seemed like there was this dark cloud came over her and she wasn't happy anymore. And it was as if she was remembering something of what had been before and that she was missing something. And yes, she had this wonderful life, but she was trying to piece it all together. She did remember, and if she heard any sounds from the sea, then she would start remembering more. It would jog something, and then she would think about the waves and the feeling of the waves on her skin and remember. And she felt that these voices from the sea were calling to her. She couldn't go there. She couldn't make that leap from one world to the next because she didn't have what she needed. And when Magnus looked at her, she always seemed to have this faraway look in her eyes. And Magnus thought perhaps it was depression. He knew that sometimes mothers, after a child was born, sometimes not straight away, but afterwards, can be depressed. And he did wonder. But alongside that thought, he had another thought. He had that guilty feeling deep down that perhaps she was hankering after what had gone before. And then one day, it all came out. She heard the noises and the waves of the sea, and the door was open. And she so wanted to go. And he could see how distressed she was. And she didn't really need to say anything, but he said, "Look, we are your family now, me and Rory. Why can't you be happy with us?" And of course she was happy, but it wasn't all of her. It wasn't all of her at all. Part of her was back there in the sea. And when he saw how crestfallen she was, how deeply unhappy she was, he couldn't bear it because he did really love her. And so he went to the chest and he got the key down and he opened it and he brought out the sealskin. And she was amazed to begin with. And she felt the skin and she just felt complete. This was part of her. This was part of her life. So although she could see how upset Magnus was and how distraught he was, she took the sealskin. She went out the door and Magnus and Rory were left. And she went into the sea. And so when Rory woke up from his sleep, it was only his dad that was there. And his dad, well, he had been involved in the bringing up of Rory, but when it came to bath time and feeding time, it was always the wife. So what was he going to do? He had to learn all these new skills, but he coped. He coped. But there was one thing at bath time, when he was bathing Rory, and he noticed something that he'd never noticed before. And he noticed that in between his toes, there was this web-like material, like there had been on his wife, in between his wife's toes. Perhaps one day his son would be able to find his mother. Perhaps he would be Selkie and maybe human. Maybe he would have the opportunity to choose at different times of his life. But anyway, he would put the baby, well, he wasn't a baby now, he was getting really quite big. He was well over a year, to bed at night. But this morning, when he went through to get him, there was a shell beside his cot. And it hadn't been there the night before, he knew. And when he looked out the cottage door, he saw these footprints in the sand. And he knew that she'd been. It was his wife that had left the shell. And then as Rory grew up, His father did take him fishing, but he always had to wear a strong harness because he was still very young. He was 4 by now, and they went out in the boat this day. And it wasn't a brilliant day, but it was reasonably warm. And he was out in his boat, and there were quite a lot of seals round about. And he went looking at one, at the other, always hoping perhaps to catch a glimpse of what he knew he probably would never be able to catch a glimpse of. But then there was a seal that came near the boat, and it had very grey eyes, cloudy. And Rudy was sitting up looking. And then all of a sudden, Rudy goes, "Mama!" And he looked in, and the grey eyes were gone. It was his pale, cornflower blue eyes. And he was looking straight at his mum. And Magnus was there with tears coming down his face. This was his wife. This was the hope. This was the hope that he'd been looking for. Okay, she wasn't human, but this was his wife. And maybe, just maybe, one day, together again. And that day did come. That day was right at the beginning of the story, when they were both sitting, looking into the fire. Thank you.
Oh, lovely. Diana, lovely. Thank you very much.
I don't like Selkie stories that are too sad, so there has to be hope in them for me.
I think you
That's-
told a very fine story very well. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Okay.
That story would give R.L. Stein, the author of Goosebumps, a run for his money. Your stories hold me spellbound.
Well, thank
Thank
you
you.
very much.
The silky stories told with the proper Scottish accent always bring me in. They always do. They absolutely
You know, I always used to think I don't have a Scottish accent, and I would go down to England on courses, and they would say, "Are you joking? You have so..."
do. Yeah. You can always tell a Welshman by the way they say year. So if it's a Welshman, they say there's a mountain over here, and it's always the word here. Here, you can always tell a
Yeah.
Scots person, male or female, by one word. So how many times do you use the word gosh?
All right, I hadn't thought of that.
I say, oh gosh, there's some sandwich here. And we never use that word in England. In England, we never say that, you know, but in Scotland, they go, oh gosh, someone's put the flags up, you know.
Wait, that makes me Scottish because we say that all the time. Oh,
Well, I
gosh.
don't.
Careful, careful.
Have you ever worn a kilt?
No
Yeah.
comment.
No, well, there you go. There's always a way out of it somewhere. John, are you going to do one? John, or do a poem? or
Yeah,
something?
yeah. Why not? Why not? I kind of need to recover from. I think I've seen about nearly 400 children over this weekend in my Santa situation in John Lewis. But I thought a sort of vaguely Christmassy story. It takes round about that time of year. It's obviously from long ago when my hair was dark and my beard was ginger and all my teeth were my own. And and there were 2 brothers. There's always 2 brothers. And obviously one is rich and one is poor. And the poor one, you know, I mean, just nothing. It worked really hard. But nothing went right. It'd have just finished mending the roof and it would blow off again. His wife would be cooking in the kitchen and the kitchen would go on fire. And he was a carpenter and a wood carver, and he'd be making a beautiful chest for the mayor. At last he had a commission, and he'd be at that last bit with the chisel, and the hammer would slip, and all his work would be wrecked, and his finger would be cut. Just couldn't work. Oh God! And it was getting near Christmas, and there was no money in the house. Now, he'd never gone and asked his brother for anything. He was a proud man. But they were down to one chicken bone. And his wife said, look, just swallow your pride. Go and ask your brother for a few leftovers. So, reluctantly, he trudged across town. I mean, his brother had a fine house. And there was the sound of merriment and laughter coming from inside. And he knocked on the door. His brother said, yes, can I help you? I've got guests. Let's not make too much fuss. He said, well, just have you got a few left? I haven't got any food for my family, just a little bit of food. His brother said, well, wait till I've finished with my guests. If they leave anything, I'll give you some. Go and wait by the back door. I don't want them seeing you when they leave. And so he waits and he waits and he waits. And eventually the last guest has left. And his brother comes to the back door and he says, you're still here? He says, yes, have you got anything? And he said, well, yes, but you know, I kind of need it for tomorrow because I've got to feed my wife, and imagine I haven't got enough food to feed my wife. Imagine, I'm afraid I can't give you anything. I said, well, can I at least have a drink? Because I'm very thirsty. Well, go. There's a tin cup over by the pump over there. Make sure you put it back. Well, he poured a cup full of water. He couldn't have stolen the cup anyway. It was on a chain. And I tell you what, that water tasted like wine. And he made his way home, and he didn't know what he was going to tell his wife and his children. He's walking home in the dark, and he hears this laughing behind him. Who's there? Oh, it's just us. Well, who's just us? Oh, we're always with you. We are the imps of misfortune. We like you. You know everything that goes wrong, that's us. You know, the roof blows up. That was us, did it? Your kitchen caught fire. That was us. You know, and the chisel slipped. That was us. You cut your finger, and the cow went sick, and there was no milk. And it's very hard work, but very rewarding. So, well, how long are you going to be with me? Oh, forever. We're going to follow you into the coffin. Well, he gets home and he tells his wife and his children that there's no food and there's no Christmas. And he goes out and he starts making a coffin. And when the coffin's complete, his wife and his children just don't know what's happening. They just think he's gone into this complete depression. And when the coffin's complete, he gets lit. He said, "You're going to follow me in the coffin." He said, "Well, maybe you should test it first. Could you get in? I just need to make sure it all fits and there's room for all of us." So they one by one, the imps of misfortune get in the coffin. And he said, "I'll just see if the lid fits." "You're all in." "Oh yes, we're all in. We're all in." "See, I'm just going to see if the lid fits." He puts the lid on. He screws it down. "It's dark in here. We don't like it." And then he heaves the coffin onto his back and he takes a spade and he goes trudging off into the snow. And his wife and his kids just think, no, Daddy, don't do it, don't, whatever, don't. We love you. We know you're not a big success. In fact, you're no success at all, but we love you. And he goes into the forest. And he digs a big hole. And he drops the coffin. We don't like this. No, it's dark. And then he covers the coffin and covers it with snow. And he goes home. And of course, as soon as he's back, his fortunes change. The work comes in. Everyone pays him twice as much as they did before, and he's soon able to build a fine house. And his wife and his children are eating well. And his brother comes back. His brother's convinced he's going to be dead by this time. His brother comes back just to see how he's doing, and the ramshackle house has gone. And there's this beautiful house in its place. And he asked the brother asked around, where's so-and-so? Oh, that's him. That's his house. He doesn't believe it. He knocks on the door. Come in, brother. So sit down. He asked him how it happened. He said, actually, you did me a big favor, because when you didn't give me anything and I was walking home in the dark, I met the reason why I was having such bad luck. And he told his brother the whole story. And his brother thought, I don't believe you. He said, come and show me where they are. He said, yeah, but don't tell anyone. And he went and he showed his brother where he buried the imps of misfortune, where the coffin was. And his brother went back the next night. And he dug up the coffin. And he started opening. Are any of you still alive? Oh yes, some of us died, but there's a few still alive. Can you take off the lid? And he took off the lid. He said, now I've set you free. You can go back to my brother. Oh no, he's a bad man. He buried us alive. No, you let us out. We like you. We're going to live with you. Well, the rest of the story is kind of, you can just imagine it. But come the next Christmas, after the rich brother had lost all his money, he did come knocking at his brother's door, but he was a different kind of man. And he was given something to eat for that Christmas.
Thank you very much, John. That was great. It's been a lovely evening again. I've been sat here for an hour and a half, and it's just blown past. Yeah, I've heard some great stories from all over the world, and I do this once a fortnight. And people call it work. Well, I don't. Some people may call it work. I think it's just glorious. So thank you all for coming. I couldn't do this without people like you turning up and telling me stories, and me and John and Ali, who set it all up and everything else. So I'm looking forward. I've met you in person a couple of times, John, but Ali in particular, I'm looking forward to. And for all of us, when we meet in Marrakesh, and with all the bad news about the pandemic and all the other things, let's cross our fingers and just hope that.
Well, I was there a couple of weeks ago,
Yeah.
and I've had a fantastic time. And what the most wonderful thing is that the Moroccan storytellers, the masters, were down there, and I was talking to them, and Zuhair was sort of translating, and Zuhair and we decided we were going to have 3 circles on the square. So everyone could get a chance out on the square. And we told the masters this, and all the old boys, the old guys, and they were getting more and more excited talking in Arabic. I hadn't the faintest idea of what was going on. And suddenly they said, they told Zuhair their decision. Zuhair said, they have come to a decision. We will not have 3 circles. We will have 5 circles. And each circle will be run by a master in the traditional manner. And apparently what we're going to do is we're going to process down all the storytellers with musicians from the storytelling school, which is quite near the square. to the square, and there'll be fun. And Jaffa, who is a very powerful man and a friend of the king and so forth, is going to arrange it all and make sure we have guards and everything. And I just thought, now, you know, we're not just parachuting in, you know, we're doing it with the master stories of Marrakesh, and that has got to be a plus. I had a fantastic week. Oh, we've got loads of... Carry on, Mike, sorry.
Right, I'll say this to you, John, that whatever happens, if for some reason it doesn't happen because of the pandemic, plan B, where you all come to Shropshire to my festival, and we'll all meet there instead. Okay, I will say that. I haven't said it before. I will say that tonight. I am hoping desperately. I'm on my knees. I will be in Marrakesh in February. And
well, I'm not allowing the power of a negative thought.
No, exactly.
Right now.
I had my third booster today. I've had my third jab today. Okay, so and I had COVID last month now, so I'm pretty bomb-proof. So
you're bomb-proof. So what we've got coming up on the cafe on Tuesday, we have our young international tellers, and Simona, this is quite relevant, but we're moving the time forward half an hour, so it's going to be 4:30 UK time, because it's getting really late because of time changes for India and stuff, and the children have to start to midnight to participate. So just moving that half an hour is going to make all the difference. We're going to get a lot more children in. So Tuesday is the young international tellers, and that's 4:30 UK time. Friday the 10th will be Bob Cunegus from New Mexico telling stories for children at 6 o'clock. On the 11th, and I must get the publicity out for this, we're having our 10 o'clock in the morning on the Saturday for or 5 o'clock in the morning from Baba C's point of view. He's for the Australian and Asian tellers, so so it's not the middle of the night for them. The 12th will be Rock, which is the Sunday, will be Rock the Casbah, and so it goes on. However, it will be going on without me at the beginning of programs, because I am having to wear the red costume and spread joy and happiness throughout the young persons in the Southwest. And I am being, would put the whole thing in the hands of the great Baba C. So
that's okay. Okay. And I'll be here in a fortnight's time, as always, at 6 o'clock UK time, to do the storytelling round. And thank you all very much for all coming. We have a Get a Word in Line concert, which is the second Thursday of December, which I think is the 10th. Where we have artists from all over. It's £5 for a ticket, and this is our way of getting online. And on Saturday, John, we gave 500 leaflets away, and we sold £500 worth of books in our local fair.
Fantastic.
Which we thought was a real thing. And thank you all for coming to this story round. And because I've been on antibiotics for 5 days because of my teeth, I'm going to say goodbye, and I'm going to the pub for a pint of beer.
I think that's ideologically sound. So farewell, Greece, Italy, Washington, DC,
the Highlands, Lincolnshire, and where are you, Cirencester, John?
I'm Swindon tonight.
Swindon, which is Swindonshire.
Swindonshire, yeah.
Okay.
Mike, I will have a drink in your honor.
Thank you very much, my friend. Ali, thank you very much again.
Thank you, Ali.
Asante, Ali.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Everyone
Good
take care.
night.
Right.
Good night. Good night.
Bye.
Good night, Ali. Well, good afternoon from my
Thank
point.
you very much.
Take care. Stay blessed. Until the next time.
Next time, my friend. Perfectly.